California Commission on Disability Access. And this session is being recorded and will be posted on our social media channels. And I'm here with my co-presenter, Jan Garrett of the Pacific ADA Center. And I want to welcome all of you to our webinar, ADA Opportunities for Small Businesses, Accessibility and Customer Service. We have a really informative lunch and learn for all of you today. And we do plan to have a question and answer session at the end. So we are going to hold questions at the end. And now I am going to popcorn over to Jan, who is going to go over some Zoom housekeeping and accessibility tips for us.
Great. Thank you, April. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. In Zoom, if you're comfortable, you can turn on your camera when you're speaking. I don't know if you'll be able, to do that, but I think you will be able to if we allow you to. And please keep your audio muted when you are not speaking. Please use the Q&A feature or to post questions. We are not using the chat feature because it's distracting for people who have vision disabilities and who use screen reading software. So to ask a question in the Q&A, select Q&A at the bottom of your screen. That should be an option for you in the Zoom menu. And then a box that's shown to the right on this slide should pop up. And you can input your questions in that box where it says type your question here through the webinar. And our Q&A session, as April mentioned, will be at the end of the presentation, but you can go ahead and put the questions in as they come to your mind, and then we will be taking them at the end of the session. So in terms of the viewing options for Zoom, in the upper right-hand corner, you can select view for speaker or gallery views. That means you'll either see just the speaker or the whole gallery along with the slides. And you can also do standard side-by-side options. So during the PowerPoint view options menu at the top of the screen, you can adjust the zoom ratio and other features. And you can also use the slider between the shared screen and the participants to slide it to your preference as far as how big you want the slides to be and how big you want the participants to be. And then our live captions are present today. Thank you to our captioner for being here. And you can turn on the captions by selecting the CC icon at the bottom of your screen again. It also will say show captions. And you can change the size of the captions as well by selecting the up arrow next to the CC button and choose the caption settings. You can also move your captions around by hovering over the captions and then dragging them to the preferred location on your screen. And then you would turn off captions by selecting again the CC icon and selecting hide captions on the menu bar. So I want to be able to tell you a little bit about what the Pacific ADA Center offers, and you'll hear from April a little bit more about what the CCDA offers. So Pacific ADA Center is one of 10 centers across the country that provides technical assistance by email and by phone on the ADA and other disability rights laws. We provide training. We've been doing a lot of Zoom training, as you might imagine, over the last few years, but we also are starting to do in-person training again. We do webinars. Right now, every other month, we are doing a webinar on healthcare and the ADA, and that is a free webinar that you're welcome to sign up for on our website. We also offer materials through our email and also through our website, and we will send you links to lots of different materials and other training opportunities, et cetera, that we have through the ADA National Network. We also typically offer one conference every year, usually in the late summer or early fall. And so you will be seeing information about that sometime at the beginning of next year.
Thank you, Jan. This is April. And I'll describe myself for accessibility modeling. I am a white woman with short grayish brown hair, and I'm wearing a black top with white striping. And I'm the executive director of the California Commission on Disability Access. We are a 17-member public commission that was formed in 2009, whose mission is to increase access across California through dialogue and collaboration with a variety of stakeholders, including but not limited to the disability, business, and all levels of government communities. So how do we live our mission? Well, we conduct small business education and outreach. We provide technical materials and trainings. We also do regional listening forums and webinars, such as this one, throughout the year. We track disability access litigation, and we create an annual report to the state legislature about our work and our data tracking.
Okay, so please excuse me for not describing myself earlier. I am a person with a lived experience of disability, although you really can't see that on the Zoom, but I am a getting older every day woman with gray hair and a black dress with blue Hawaiian flowers on it. And so I just wanted to let you know that I have a lived experience of disability. So not only is the ADA important to me from a professional standpoint, it's also important from a personal standpoint as well. So let me describe the different types of disabilities that may be covered or that you may encounter as you operate your business. So people have many types of disabilities, and not all of them are physical. Some disabilities are obvious and some are not obvious. And people with disabilities are more likely to experience a lack of services and accessibility. And that's one of the reasons why we're doing this webinar and why we exist and why CCDA exists. But also you should know that people with disabilities have $21 billion annually in discretionary income to spend. So not only do they have that income, but all of their friends who really had a great experience in using your business will come and spend their discretionary income as well. So even though people with disabilities may experience a lot of discrimination, you can make sure they have a great experience at your business and make sure they come and spend their income with you.
Thank you, Jan. This is April. It's important to know that disability and the disability community is not a monolith. People with disabilities aren't just a singular group sort of off to the side. We're a part of the fabric of every community. We're a member of all races and ethnicities, all gender identities, all ages, and all national origins. And a common phrase is that disability is the only minority you can join, and that's okay. Disability is a natural part of the human experience and can happen to anyone at any time. And as we get older, many of us will acquire disabilities as well. So if you think about the work that you do in your community, if you're focused on, racial justice or LGBTQI+ rights, or if you're a small business owner who wants to recruit a diverse population to work with you or to make sure you're serving them properly, just remember that even if you are not specifically targeting people with disabilities in your mission, you are serving people with disabilities. People with disabilities are your customers.
Thank you, April. And this is Jan. So when you do encounter people with disabilities as part of the whole diversity, equity, and inclusion space, make sure that you use inclusive and respectful language. So we often talk about using people first. So examples would be a person who is blind or people who use wheelchairs. But a person is not their disability. So don't call somebody retarded or a quadriplegic or an epileptic. They are a person. Emphasize their ability rather than their limitations. And also understand that while disability may be difficult at times, it is not a tragedy or a challenge to overcome. We live with our disabilities day in and day out. And if the world is more accessible to us, then it's actually just part of our identity and something that we move through the world with our identity. So make sure that you understand that it's not a tragedy for us.
Thank you, Jan. This is April. So here are a couple other terms to avoid. You want to avoid using terms like wheelchair bound, special needs, differently abled, physically challenged, inspirational. Those all sort of go back to what Jan was talking about, that people with disabilities are people and not their disabilities. And a lot of these terms, though may be well-intentioned, take away from that, and also can be offensive. It's important to know that some people don't even like people first language. There are a lot of people in the neurodivergent community who really claim disability. They say, I am a disabled person, or I am an autistic person. And they say that because they're proud of who they are, and they don't want to apologize for having a disability. They acknowledge that disability isn't the only part of who they are, but that it's important to them, and they want their needs known and met in the community. And we recommend that as a business owner, ask their name, ask people's names, get to know your customers, get to know how they want to be referred to. And if you're not sure, just ask.
And I would just say that even people with disabilities beyond the neurodiverse community as well, many people have disability pride about their disability, and that can be from all different types of disabilities. And then one quick comment about when people call me inspirational just for doing everyday activities, and this is Jan speaking, by the way, that when they call me inspirational, I say, that's great. What did I inspire you to do? How did I inspire you to make things better for the disability community? And so that's one way you can think of to respond when people may call you inspirational. So when somebody with a disability comes in to your business or your nonprofit organization or your state or local government agency, people with disabilities will generally ask when they need assistance. It's fine if it looks like somebody may need assistance to say, may I assist you, or may I help you? And then if the person says yes, ask how. How may I help you? How may I assist you? Because you may not really understand how, even though you think you understand, the person will be able to tell you much better how is best to assist them. And so always ask if it's a yes answer, then say, how may I assist you? But then if the person does not want your assistance, don't be offended by that. There are times when it may look like to somebody that I'm struggling, like to pull my cell phone out of my pocket on the back of my wheelchair, for example. But it may be really important that I be able to do that independently, because I may need to do it when no one else is around. And so that's really important, that if somebody says, oh, no, thanks, I got it, don't be offended by that. It's okay. So you asked, you did the right thing. And if they say no, they say no, and you can move on.
Thanks, Jan. This is April. And just to model accessibility, the reason why Jan and I are saying our names before each slide is because people with many different types of disabilities may have trouble tracking who is speaking. They may not be able to see the speaker, or it may just be better for them for a variety of reasons to be able to be included in this presentation by being able to track who is speaking. So this is April. Many of you may have heard of the Americans with Disabilities Act. It was just a few months ago that we had our ADA anniversary that we celebrated at our CCDA meeting. The Americans with Disabilities Act is considered the major civil rights law for people with disabilities, and it was signed by President George H.W. Bush on July 26, 1990, and it protects people with disabilities from discrimination, promotes integration, and provides equal opportunity. And the goal is the full inclusion of people with disabilities in all aspects of American society. And Jan is going to drill a little bit deeper into the titles of the ADA and talk a little bit more about the law.
And this is Jan speaking. And this picture on this slide does show President George H.W. Bush surrounded by the disability advocates on the White House lawn as he's signing the ADA into law. This is Jan again. So this year, because we know the ADA was signed into law in 1990, this year we are celebrating 33 years of the ADA. So as April said, happy anniversary ADA. And because the ADA has been around for 33 years, we should definitely know about how to comply with it and know what it requires for us, so that we can move forward and be able to comply with this really major, important civil rights law.
Thanks, Jan. This is April. So now that we've given you a grounding in inclusive language, talked a little bit about, groundbreaking civil rights laws, and talked a little bit about ourselves, let's talk about what is disability. How does the ADA define disability? Well, disability is defined very broadly under the Americans with Disabilities Act. It can include things like physical disabilities, developmental, psychiatric, cognitive, intellectual, learning, vision, hearing, speech, addiction if you're in recovery, and health disabilities. There's no all-inclusive list. And many people don't know that they fit under the definition of disability. One quick fact is that it's important to note that according to the CDC, 1 in 4 Americans have a disability.
This is Jan speaking. Yeah, so the issue is that even if you don't consider yourself to have a disability, it is quite likely that you know 1 or more people with disabilities in your life. So what is a disability as far as what the ADA says? As April was saying, it's defined very broadly under the ADA. There's no sort of all-inclusive list. And it does include all those different physical, developmental, psychiatric, cognitive, intellectual, learning, vision, hearing, speech, and all kinds of, oh, I think this is actually the same slide. There we go. Back to the title. Sorry. So as April was saying, that who is covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act, but this is what the ADA actually covers in terms of the titles. So Title I is employment, and that covers everything from recruiting people with disabilities to hiring, to the on-the-job process. And we will, I think, be covering in some future webinars employment and the ADA. So stand by and stay tuned for that. Also, Title II covers what are called public entities. Part A of Title II covers state and local governments. Part B covers public transportation. So the buses and the light rail systems that are operated by government entities are covered under Title II. Also, Amtrak is covered under Title II. Title III, which most of you will be that are on the call today, although we realize that maybe many of you are coming from a variety of different places. Most of you are probably businesses or private nonprofit organizations. And if you are covered under ADA Title III for public accommodations, which means private businesses and nonprofits that are open to the public. And so that's almost everything that you can think of, from grocery stores to nail salons to doctor's offices. All of those places are privately owned and are open to the public. And so they are called public accommodations. Title IV is telecommunications, which mostly deals with how people who are have hearing disabilities and/or speech disabilities can communicate by phone with others, and that they can access the 911 systems for emergency calling. And then Title V is miscellaneous. It contains a lot of different provisions, but it includes sections that say that you cannot retaliate against somebody for asserting their rights under the ADA.
Thank you, Jan. So let's talk a little bit about what Title III covers. This is April, related to small businesses serving the public. So the ADA, as at Title III, as Jan was saying, covers places of public accommodation open to the public, which includes social service organizations, retail stores, and restaurants. And it's important to note that it includes all types of private businesses and nonprofit organizations, no matter how many employees they have.
This is Jan speaking. So one of the obligations of both Title II state and local governments and Title III public accommodations is effective communication for people who have communication disabilities. So you must provide effective communication to people with hearing, vision, and or speech disabilities. And we'll learn more in a moment about what that means. What does effective communication mean, and how do you provide it to people with communication related disabilities?
And on this slide, if you could go back one, there's a visual. There are two Black women, and they're both speaking to each other in sign language. Thank you. This is April. So now that Jan has given us a definition of what effective communication means under the ADA, let's talk about some examples of what effective communication might look like for your customers who have a variety of disabilities. So let's talk about what effective communication looks like for people with vision disabilities. They may need information about your business in alternative formats, and those might include electronic, large print, or braille. You want to make sure that your website is accessible to screen readers. And there's something called qualified readers that are used to convey technical information. So a qualified reader is someone who, let's just use an example. Let's say that you're a land developer and you're creating a new venue and someone wants to learn more about it, and you produce a technical document about that venue. You would have a qualified reader who understands some of the land developer jargon to read that to the person so that they can convey the right tone and word choice and correct pronunciation. But let's say you're a restaurant owner and the customer comes in and they just want help reading a menu. You don't need the chef to come out to read the menu. You don't need a qualified reader to do that. The server or someone else could be the person who helps them read the menu and things of that nature that are non-technical.
And this is Jan speaking. If we go back one quickly, but there is a photograph of somebody reading a Braille document with their finger on the Braille dots. So this is Jan again. So communication for people who have hearing disabilities can take a variety of forms. And this picture is actually showing somebody communicating in sign language with somebody on a laptop on the other side, likely a relay service operator. So for hearing disabilities, you might actually communicate with people with in-person sign language interpreters or with video remote interpreting, where the interpreters are actually remote, but you can see them and they can see the deaf person as well through a tablet and using the tablet's camera. And so those are options for sign language interpreters. And it depends kind of on your situation about whether video remote interpreting is really more important and appropriate to use, or whether in-person sign language interpreters would really be needed in a particular situation. Also, there are people who may not know American Sign Language because they did not grow up knowing American Sign Language. Maybe they lost their hearing later in life. And for those folks, they typically need real-time captioning, like we're offering, for example, on the webinar today. And that's where you type into a stenography type of machine so that you can get all the words very quickly and people can be able to read on a screen what's being said back and forth. Also for the relay service, which exists through the telephone service that we all pay for through our phone bills. And you can dial 711 and be able to get to a relay operator who can help someone who has a hearing or even a speech disability be able to make a phone call to someone else that does not have a video phone or another ability to talk with that person who has a hearing or a speech disability. Also, you can write notes back and forth or text back and forth for simple, brief conversations, like, how much is that candy bar? It's $1.50. Boy, inflation. That is something that you can do with a brief note back and forth. But any kind of more complex, more lengthy communication needs to really use the type of communication that the person finds effective for them.
Thank you, Jan. This is April. To the right, there is a photograph of a woman in a black and white wheelchair. She's wearing a green shirt, and she's trying to open a really heavy door. And that illustrates that she's really struggling with that door because that business may not have thought about what accessibility might look like for people with mobility disabilities. I myself am a wheelchair user who loves to go to restaurants and bars with my friends. And so accessibility for those businesses is really important to me. It's really important when you're thinking about accessibility for people with mobility disabilities that you think about things like accessible parking, no step entrances with wide, easy open doors, and also try to think about the opening force of the door. Imagine if, as this picture illustrates to the right, somebody who is sitting lower to the ground and who may not have use of their limbs or have limited use of their limbs trying to grab a really heavy door and swing their wheelchair through it. It's important to note that door opening force needs to be 5 pounds or less in California. Also think about your interior accessible paths of travel. I can't tell you how many times I go to businesses, and sometimes, you know, I'm trying to go use the bathroom. So I'm thinking about leaving my table to use the bathroom, then to come back and pay and then head out. Those are all examples of interior accessible paths. And let's say I try to go to the bathroom, but there's like high chairs in the way, or I go into the bathroom. And let's talk a little bit about accessible restrooms. You know, it's important to know that restrooms have to be accessible. So one common error that I often see is the toilet paper rack sometimes is right above the grab bar, and so I'm not able to transfer to the toilet, which may mean that I may have to leave my friends early and go home and go to the bathroom, which is really embarrassing for me and your other customers. You also want to remember to keep your counters and bars accessible by offering a lowered portion of such counter or bar. Make sure that there's an accessible way for people to order or sit and have a drink with their friends. Sometimes one thing I've seen in my travels is I see that sometimes places that have bars will use their accessible bar area as a place to store things or to conduct point of sale transactions. And so then it ceases to become the accessible area, which means that my friends and I can't come and have a drink at your bar, and you're losing out on a customer who's going to spend money there.
And this is Jan speaking. Also, as April was talking about, in terms of keeping everything accessible, make sure that you're not storing the extra toilet paper in the wheelchair accessible stall of your restroom as well. So keep everything, once you have those accessible features, like that area next to your parking space, like the accessible restroom, keep those clear and maintain your accessible features. That's really important. So now we're going to talk a little bit about service animals. So service animals are dogs as they're defined under the ADA, and those dogs must be trained to do one or more physical tasks for their handlers. The handler's disability does not have to be physical, but the dog's task does have to be physical. They have to do something physical for their handler. Emotional support or comfort is not a task. And therefore, if somebody has an emotional support animal with them, that may be a very important animal for them, and they may really need that. But emotional support animals are not allowed in public places that have a no pet policy. Whereas service animals, you have to modify that no pet policy to allow a service animal. So not only does that have to be a dog that does one or more physical tasks for its handler, it also has to be under control. It has to be housebroken, well behaved, so not barking or growling or running around. It needs to be on a leash or tether or under strict voice control if the handler cannot handle that leash or tether. And one little caveat here, even though the definition of service animal is a dog, the regulations in the ADA say miniature horses may need to be allowed. And we're talking really small horses that are the size of a large dog. And those may be used by some people with disabilities because they live longer and their training can last a lot longer than a dog. So just know that occasionally you may see a miniature horse in addition to a dog, but that's the only animals you should be seeing as service animals.
And to the right, the lower right-hand corner, you see a really cute, you see a miniature horse that is wearing tennis shoes, and it says assistance animal in training, and it looks like they're providing a guide service. They have a harness on. You can't really see the person, but it appears that they may have a vision disability. And then there's 3 service dogs, 2 tan and 1 black, with vests on in the corner. This is April. One question that I get from a lot of business owners is, what can I ask if I am unsure if a customer's animal is a legitimate service animal? What questions may I ask? Well, the law allows 2 questions that the government or businesses can ask. Number 1 is the animal required because of a disability? If the disability is obvious, please don't ask that question because there's no need to, because then that becomes more intrusive. Also, the second question you're allowed to ask is, what work or tasks has the animal been trained to perform? But it's important to know that that animal is not there for your amusement, they're working. So please don't ask the handler invasive questions about their disability. Really don't ask them anything about their disability, and do not ask them to see the tasks that are being performed. You may actually harm that handler service animal relationship by asking to have the animal demonstrate a task that they're not ready to perform. For example, they may be trained to, detect low blood sugar levels in someone who's diabetic. And if you ask them to try to perform that task, I don't know how you would do that, but it would, if the person doesn't have low blood sugar, the dog wouldn't be able to perform that task. Also, you may notice that there's a lot of companies that advertise that, we can sell you a vest that says your dog is a service animal and stuff like that, but, or they can print you a certificate. It's important to note that those certificates and badges are not worth the paper or cloth that they're printed on, they don't require, under the ADA, service animals are not required to wear such identification, and you're not allowed to ask for that. You're only allowed to ask those 2 questions.
And this is Jan speaking to kind of reinforce what April was saying. Also to note that service animals, handlers can train their own animals. They do not have to actually take them to a professional training service. That's one of the reasons why you're not allowed to ask for certificates, because if you train the animal yourself, you don't have a certificate to show someone. Also, those professional training nonprofits usually are expensive to actually train the animal, and they have a long waiting list. So the Department of Justice that enforces the ADA said people with disabilities that are handlers can train their own animals. Also, you need to know that service animals in training are allowed under California state law. The ADA doesn't discuss service animals in training, but California law does allow service animals in training. So somebody may come in with an animal and says, this is a service animal in training, and you need to allow it to come in. Also, as April was saying, there's no certificates, vests, ID cards, anything like that that are necessary to prove an animal is a service animal. Simply ask the 2 questions, and if the handler answers them, and they are required to answer them, then don't ask for proof. And then you can also just make sure that that service animal is under control as well. You do have the right to ask that they be under control.
Thank you, Jan. This is April. So all of us on this call today have the ability to increase access in our businesses and in our communities for ourselves and others. Access starts with me and it starts with you. So it's really important as a business owner that you need to plan for the accessibility of your business. You need to make sure that you're designating a responsible staff person. Often those people are called site ADA coordinators, but they don't have to be. That person could be tasked with things like creating checklists, duty sheets, etc. You should be thinking about the types of notifications you want in your business, like post-service animals are allowed notifications outside your door or by the counter so that people know that you're complying with the ADA and that service animals are allowed at your business. Also consider additional signage. You know, is there signage that could help clarify the path of travel to certain key components of your business? You also want to evaluate facilities for future uses. So if you're a nonprofit and you have a board, or if you're a small business and have some ownership groups and you have meetings and you're thinking about strategically, you know, let's say you're a restaurant and you want to offer an axe throwing service or something like that. You know, I've seen those pop up. Think about how you are going to plan for access as you grow your business and change your strategy around your business model. Also, you also want to make sure that you realize that accessibility sometimes does have a cost to it. Often it is, most accommodations are not very expensive, but some can be. And so you want to budget for facility and communication access. Make sure that as you're planning your budget for your business and you're getting your revenue and looking at your spreadsheets, that you're not forgetting to budget for the access that we've talked about today that you may need to do. Also, it's important to note that many municipalities, as well as the federal and state governments, may have grants available for ADA remediations. And that's one of the things that CCDA can explain to you if you give us a call. And it's just really important to remember that no matter who you are, whether you are the owner of a business, an employee, or a customer, all of us, if we realize that access starts with us, can make sure that businesses are compliant and accessible for people with disabilities.
This is Jan speaking. And if you budget for those costs, like removing barriers at your business, like providing sign language interpreters, if you need that, then you're not surprised by it and you're able to provide it if someone asks. So that's why it's so important to budget for those items. So, and it looks like, this is Jan speaking again, it looks like we are at the time for questions.
One of the questions that we have received is, what is the CCDA?
Thank you. The CCDA, this is April. The CCDA is the California Commission on Disability Access, and we are a 17-member public commission that was formed by the California State Legislature in 2009. And what we do is we work with a variety of stakeholders, such as the business, disability, and local government communities, to increase access to businesses. So our focus is business access, and we do things like partnering with the Pacific ADA on these types of webinars. We also produce technical documents. We have some technical documents that are being produced right now on accessible parking and website accessibility. We also track data on alleged disability access violations related to construction-related disability claims, as well as website alleged disability claims. And we use that data to target our programming and technical resources. And we maintain a website that has lots of resources that we either produce or others produce. And our main goal is to make sure that people with disabilities can access businesses, and that businesses understand how access is good for business and their obligations under Title III of the ADA and other laws that apply to access and businesses.
A question that we just received is, Can you address ADA requirements given the changes over time in point of sale technology and processes? For example, more POS systems are mobile. How does this dovetail with the requirement for counter heights?
So April, did you want me to take that one? This is
Sorry,
Jan.
yes, I was clicking out of the Q&A box. Yes, Jan, we'll go ahead and take that one.
Okay. Well, I mean, I can try to answer it to the best of my ability. I think a lot of point of sale technology is through mobile apps and things like that. And the web content accessibility guidelines do have the more recent ones do have some accessibility requirements for apps as well as websites. So you may want to look at that. Right now, there is nothing that is actually a standard, except in California. I do think there are some laws that are, again, that are requiring at least the state government entities, state and local government entities that receive state funding to make their websites accessible. And eventually there will be very specific regulations from the U.S. Justice Department for state and local governments at the federal level under the ADA, but also eventually for small businesses under the ADA. But right now, even when you look at the Department of Justice settlement agreements that have been reached, they say that for effective communication, you need to make sure that your website, your point of sale apps, all of those things are as accessible as you can make them, because the Justice Department under the ADA considers all of that to be effective communication. So make sure that that is as accessible as you can make it, in addition to keeping your counter space accessible for people, your physical access to your counter space accessible. So it's both software and your building that need to be as accessible as possible.
And this is April. We have some questions in the chat and the comment. Someone wrote that they had a patient that wanted to communicate in writing how they can share patient wishes when some departments use other electronic health records, so we cannot communicate via the electronic method. That might be related to talking about alternate formats. That might have been when that popped up. I don't know, Jan, if you had insight into that.
This is Jan speaking. Well, it could be that you're going to have to make, if your usual policy is that you enter things into the electronic health record and that electronic health record is not accessible to that patient that has a vision disability or another disability, then you're going to need to figure out a reasonable modification of policy, in addition to making sure that your communication is effective. So figure out, how can you get that communication? How can you share that with the person who has the vision disability, but also how can you share information that they need to give to you with whoever else needs to know that information, and make sure that you're always modifying any policies and procedures that you have that are creating barriers for people, because that is something that the ADA does require as well.
We also got a question about, can we please dive a bit more into accessible identifiers for service animals like vests or tags? I believe we already answered that, but you don't have to have vests or tags for service animals. You only can ask them the two questions that we talked about. Is this animal required because of a disability? And what is the task that they're trained to perform? But again, don't ask them to perform the task, and do not ask about the disability if it's obvious. And also don't ask invasive questions about a person's disability. Okay. Presley, do we have any other questions in the Q&A? And then I can go back to the chat.
The Q&A there is one more that wants to ask if we can expand on the option to crate an animal, and if the business would have to provide it to the customer.
I'm sorry, this is Jan speaking, Presley. To crate an animal, to put an animal in a crate, is that
correct? Yes,
okay.
correct.
Okay, So, and please remember everyone to post your questions in the Q&A, not in the chat for accessibility purposes. We see a lot of things in the chat and I know you want to communicate with us, but please do use the Q&A whenever possible. In terms of creating an animal, you know, typically you'll see at amusement parks or other places where it may not be appropriate for that animal to be in every part of that location, like an amusement park, like a zoo, where maybe some of the animals are predators or prey of dogs. And therefore you don't want to take the service dog all the way through the zoo. And you certainly can't take a service dog on many rides in amusement parks that are, you know, very fast rides that are not safe for the animal. So you may need to have crates that are available to put the animal into. You should make sure that they're, you know, shaded, that the animal has water. And you're going to, if that's a guide animal, for example, for someone, you're going to have to be able to guide that person. If they're there by themselves and they're not with someone else, you may have to provide staff or a volunteer to make sure that person is guided through that zoo or that amusement park if they cannot have their animal with them. So yes, usually service animals can go anywhere their handler can go, but there may be places where the service animal is not appropriate. And in that case, having a crate in the shade with water, a safe place for that animal to be, and that the person can come back and get their animal when as they're leaving that site.
This is April. We also had a question, can elevators serving 2 floors be decommissioned if there are sufficient ADA ramps providing a clear path of travel? I think we might need more information on that specific situation, but I don't know if Jan wanted to add anything to that.
This is Jan speaking. I mean, in general, you should not ever take away accessibility options. That's not really allowed to remove accessibility that was once there. And you may have to do some work on your ramps at some point. Maybe they're going to need some, you know, renovation at some point. So you may want to keep those elevators in service in case the ramps are not usable, and in general, under the kind of premise that you're not supposed to take away any accessibility that you have now. So don't reduce your accessibility, but again, yes, I think we would have to know a little bit more about this situation.
Thank you. One of our next Q&A questions is, what trainings or certifications can an individual do to focus on an ADA coordinator in a small business?
This is April. I'll share that the Department of Justice doesn't endorse any specific training, but there is a training by the University of Missouri that has an ADA coordinator certification, and that was created in an effort to make sure that ADA coordinators got uniform training and the same training, sort of a uniform training, and the same information. And I think the Pacific ADA Center may have some resources too that Jan may want to talk about specific to ADA coordinators.
Yes, thank you, April. This is Jan speaking. So the Pacific ADA Center supports ADA coordinator networks or coalitions actually throughout our region. And our region is Arizona, Nevada, California, Hawaii, and the Pacific Basin territories. So we have a very active coalition or network in both Arizona and in California. And people can ask to join those networks. It is up to the steering committee of those coalitions or networks about whether they will allow people to join, but they do sometimes allow people that are from private entities like public accommodations to join, as long as they are actually serving in the role of an ADA coordinator. You can actually write to the Pacific ADA Center, go to our website and email us. There's also a form that we can send to you to join one of the coalitions, or we can forward your email over to one of our coalition steering committee members or network steering committee members to have you join the ADA coordinator network or coalition. And we provide monthly meetings where people can network, and we provide trainings for ADA coordinators. And then, as April was saying, there's the ADA coordinator certification program that has all kinds of training. And there's lots of training also on the ADA National Network website that you can go to adata.org and find lots of training, as well as accessibility online through the Great Lakes ADA Center. There's lots and lots of webinars that you can take there and sign up for. That's all free information. And there's years and years worth of archived webinars there, just as there is on the Pacific ADA Center. We have archived webinars on emergency management and preparedness in the ADA and healthcare in the ADA. So there's lots and lots of information out there. And if you have questions and you're really not sure where to find all this training, all this ADA coordinator information, just email us at the Pacific ADA Center, ADA Tech, ADATECH at adapacific.org. And we're happy to provide you with that additional information.
Hi, April and Jan. This is Abigail. We have another question in the chat that's more of a clarifying question. They would like to know, even as California law says that service animals can be a dog or a miniature horse, if you can go ahead and provide some more clarification on that topic.
This is Jan speaking. I'm not really sure what clarification you're looking for. Basically, a service animal is defined as a dog in the ADA. And a miniature horse is also allowed under the ADA regulations to be able to serve somebody who needs their support as a handler. It used to be that people could have all kinds of different animals as service animals. And after 2011, the regulations changed. The ADA regulations that the Department of Justice enforces changed. And that basically said now a service animal is only a dog, and you may have to allow a miniature horse when it can fit in the area, when it's appropriate, and if it's not a fundamental alteration for the area where the person is bringing it. So there are, that's really the only animals that are allowed at this point under the ADA. And, you know, so I don't know if that's what your question was, is which animals are allowed, or and again, those animals have to be under control. They have to be on a leash or tether or strict voice control, and they have to do one or more tasks to be able to be considered a service animal. I did want to mention that in housing, so in the Fair Housing Act, emotional support animals are allowed, and those can be pretty much any animal. They don't necessarily have to be a dog or a miniature horse, but that's really only in housing and only under the Fair Housing Act as a law. If you're talking about the ADA, you're talking about dogs and miniature horses.
Thank you for your response. It looks like we have answered any of the questions that we've had available. So I will put it to the next slide for you.
Thank you, Presley. This is April, and I just want to share with you some resources that you can utilize for your business. And please, in a moment, we'll be sharing information slides about the Pacific ADA Center and the CCDA, so that you know how to get a hold of us and keep in touch with us. And if there is a burning question that you didn't get answered today, or it didn't enter your mind until you went back to your office and talked to your staff, or went back to your place of business and talked to your staff about it, please reach out to either of our organizations. There's a really great primer for small businesses on the ada.gov website. If you go to www.ada.gov/resources, there's a Title III primer for you. You can also learn more about effective communication also at ada.gov. And also service animals and the ADA frequently asked questions. So if we didn't dive deep enough into your question that person asked, they can go to www.ada.gov/resources and go to the service animal tab. Let's go to the next slide, and I'll do that one also. There's also at the ADA, that's the ADA National Network, right, Jan? The adata.org. Yes.
Yeah. The other one that we just were mentioning on the prior slide, ada.gov is the U.S. Justice Department website. That's where those resources were on the previous slide. And then adata.org is the ADA National Network. Yes.
Thank you. And those, the ADA National Network has some quick tips about tax incentives. Also, if you go to the Division of the State Architect resources page, that's at dgs.ca.gov/dsa/resources. You can learn about certified access specialists. Now, certified access specialists have specific training on local, state, and federal laws on how to make sure that your business is accessible to people with disabilities. And if you hire a certified access specialist, you may receive legal benefits if you are sued for lack of access to your business. And so there are legal benefits, as well as, it's always important. The CCDA and the Pacific ADA always say that it's important to plan for access on the front end instead of waiting for a lawsuit, or if you get served a demand letter, you should, consider consulting a certified access specialist. Also, on the Division of the State Architect website, you can learn more about the disability. You can learn more about the Disability Access Education and Revolving Fund and how that helps local municipalities with training and hiring and retaining CASPs, as well as there is a new law that was passed in the prior session, not the one that just ended, but the session before last in the state legislature, that now allows those funds to be used in part for ADA remediation costs for small businesses. And a lot of municipalities such as the city of San Jose and the city of San Diego and the city of San Francisco provide ADA remediation grants to small businesses. So check with your building department or your economic development department for more information to see if they offer that in your area. All right, and I'll share that the California Commission on Disability Access, we have a newsletter. So if you go to dgs.ca.gov, please sign up for our newsletter, connect with us. We'd love to have you on our mailing list so that you can learn more about the toolkits we're releasing, as well as webinars and more information about if there's a listening forum in your area coming up. You can also call us or send us an email. Our email is ccda@dgs.ca.gov, and we answer all public inquiries, even ones if we receive a inquiry on an issue that is not related to CCDA's purview, we still help you find the answer and give you a warm handoff.
Thank you, April. This is Jan speaking. So we hope that people will also contact the Pacific ADA Center when you need us, when it's appropriate to do that. And this slide has information on where you can send us a snail mail, but also how you can call us 1-800-949-4232. And that number, actually, that 1-800-949-4232 is nationwide. And so whatever area code you have, that will get you to the ADA National Network Center that serves the area code that your phone is from. So if you move from Boston to California and you're living in California now and you call that 800 number, you're actually going to get the New England ADA Center. But the New England ADA Center will refer you over to the Pacific ADA Center if you say that you're in California, because we all work together. All 10 regions of the ADA National Network work very, very closely together. So just use that 800 number. It's toll free. And then as I gave our email earlier, ADA Tech, ADA-TECH @adapacific.org. And then our website at adapacific.org as well. And on our website, you can subscribe to our newsletter as well. Many of you may have seen this webinar on our listserv or newsletter. So please do subscribe to us, and we'll be informing you about things that are coming up with the Pacific ADA Center, as well as our future collaborations with the CCDA and future webinars that we'll do that we know you want to join us for, because they will be informative. So please don't hesitate to get in touch with us if you have any further questions or want to join us for any further webinars or training.
And this is April. I want to echo what Jan said and thank you all for joining us today. And I look forward to meeting you in future webinars and future opportunities to collaborate. And I hope that if you do anything after today, I hope that you go back to your business or your nonprofit or your government agency and think, what is one thing I'm going to do to increase access in my business or my community? Because access starts with you and it starts with me, and everyone can do something to increase access to businesses for people with disabilities. Thank you and have a wonderful afternoon.
Yes, thank you so much. This is Jan speaking. We really appreciate you being here, and thank you to CCDA and everyone, April and everyone at CCDA for this great collaboration.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to the team and all of us who helped put this on today. Thank you, Jan, for being an awesome co-presenter. Have a wonderful day.